Picture this. It's December of 1900. On a remote, storm-beaten rock in the North Atlantic, a lighthouse, a beacon of safety, just goes dark. When help finally arrives, the station is completely abandoned. The clocks have stopped, and the three men tasked with keeping the light have vanished. For more than 100 years, this story has been one of the great maritime mysteries. So today, we're going to look at the clues and piece together what really happened.
Okay, so our story all starts right here, on Elian Moor. It's this tiny, rugged island way off the coast of Scotland. And let me tell you, this place is no paradise. We're talking treacherous cliffs and seriously harsh seas. Back in 1899, they built this brand new lighthouse to guide ships through these dangerous waters, and it was run by a rotation of some really tough, experienced keepers.
The three men on duty that month were James Ducat, the principal keeper, Thomas Marshall, the second assistant, and a guy named Donald McArthur, who was filling in. Right in the middle of their shift, all three of them just disappeared. So that's the big question we're tackling in this explainer. What in the world happened to the men of the Flannan Isles? You know, the first clue that something was wrong wasn't actually on the island itself. It was the silence from it. So let's dig into how the alarm was first raised. It all starts on December 15th. A passing ship, the steamer Arctur, logs that the light is out, which is a really big deal. Now, the relief ship, the Hesperus, was supposed to head out on the 20th, but it got held back by some absolutely brutal storms. So it wasn't until Boxing Day, December 26th, that it finally made it to the island. And it was met with this deep, unnerving quiet. The relief keeper, Joseph Moore, was the first one to set foot on the island. And what he found was just eerie. The main gate was closed, but the lighthouse door was unlocked. Inside, the kitchen clock had stopped. The beds were unmade. The fireplace was cold. But there was one detail that really stood out. One of the 3 sets of oilskins, their heavy-duty rain gear, was still hanging on its hook. Why would one of these pros go out into a North Atlantic storm without it? The only sign of life on the whole island? A single canary, still chirping away in its cage. The captain of the Hesperus knew right away this was serious. He didn't waste any time sending a telegram to the Northern Lighthouse Board. He didn't mince words. It read, "A dreadful accident has happened at Flannan's. The 3 keepers have disappeared from the island. Poor fellows, they must have been blown over the cliffs or drowned." So, with the alarm raised, an official investigation kicked off immediately. The man sent to figure it all out was Superintendent Robert Muirhead. And get this, he was the one who had personally recruited all 3 of the missing keepers. So for him, this was personal. He had to separate the hard facts from all the wild speculation that was already starting to swirl. Muirhead's investigation on the island uncovered evidence of just incredible, almost unbelievable power. The damage he found at the West Landing, which is over 100 feet above sea level, by the way, was just staggering. His official report notes that thick iron railings were bent and twisted, an iron railway track was ripped right out of its concrete base, and a boulder weighing more than a ton had been moved. Okay, let's put on our detective hats and just lay out the key facts from that official investigation. The last entry in the log slate was from the morning of December 15th, and it just showed that all their morning chores were done. Inside the lighthouse, everything was perfect. The lamps were cleaned and refilled, which suggests the men disappeared sometime after their work was finished. Then you've got that single coat of MacArthur's left behind, implying he ran outside in a huge hurry. And finally, that incredible damage at the West Landing, pointing to a massive, powerful wave. Like any great mystery, the story of the Flannan Isles has collected a ton of myths and legends over the last century. It's been sensationalized quite a bit, so now it's time for a little myth-busting. Let's separate what really happened from the fiction. All right, this is probably the biggest myth of them all. You've probably heard this one, about a crazy logbook that was found, describing a terrifying supernatural storm, with one keeper crying and all 3 men praying in fear for days. It makes for a great horror story, but I've got to tell you, it's completely made up. Researchers have confirmed, without a doubt, that these log entries were fabricated years later just to sell magazines. The official investigation found no such logbook. It just never existed. So you might be asking, where did all these fake stories come from? Well, a lot of them can be traced back to this popular poem from 1912 by a guy named Wilfred Wilson Gibson. His poem has these really vivid lines that describe an untouched dinner still on the table and a single chair knocked over, as if the men vanished in a panic right in the middle of their meal. It's a powerful image, for sure, but it's pure fiction.
Remember, the first guy on the scene reported the kitchen was clean. The men had probably already eaten. Okay, so now that we've cleared away all that fiction and sensationalism, we can start to build a real picture of what most likely happened to those three men based on the actual evidence found at the scene. The leading theory, and the one that makes the most sense, centers on a phenomenon we now understand pretty well: the rogue wave. Now, these aren't just big storm waves. We're talking about massive, completely unpredictable walls of water that can seem to appear out of nowhere. Modern instruments in that same part of the North Atlantic have recorded waves nearly 100 feet high, which is more than enough to explain the kind of damage seen on Elian Moor. Let's just focus on this number for a second: 110 feet. That's how high up the cliffs the damage was found. That's like an 11-story building. A huge, heavy storage box was swept away, and iron railings were ripped out of solid concrete at 110 feet above sea level. It just gives you a sense of the almost unbelievable force we're talking about here. But that still leaves a big question. Why would two experienced keepers be out there near the landing in such dangerous conditions in the first place? Well, here's what might be the crucial motive. Recent research dug up a fascinating detail. It turns out that keeper Thomas Marshall had been fined 5 shillings, which was a lot back then, maybe about 30 pounds in today's money, for losing equipment in a previous storm. You can bet he was determined to avoid another fine by making sure that gear was secure. So this evidence lets us piece together the most logical chain of events. Here's how it likely went down. First, Marshall and Ducat head down to that west landing to secure a box of ropes, probably because Marshall is worried about getting that fine. From up in the lighthouse, McArthur sees it. A monstrous, unexpected rogue wave building out at sea, a wave his friends below can't see. He rushes out to warn them, not even bothering to grab his coat in his panic. But he's too late. The wave hits the cliff with what that official report called resistless force, and it sweeps all three men into the violent Atlantic. And so this one event, really a tragedy born from a freak of nature and the keeper's strong sense of duty, has left this incredible legacy. It's a mystery that, even with a logical explanation, still captures our imagination. Since 1971, the Flannan Isles Lighthouse has been fully automated. It doesn't need keepers anymore. So today, it just stands there, a silent, lonely monument to James Ducat, Thomas Marshall, and Donald McArthur, and a constant reminder of the raw power of the sea. At the end of the day, we have the facts. We have a logical motive. We have a scientific explanation that fits all the evidence. And yet, no bodies were ever recovered. Not a single trace of the men was ever found. And that leaves us with one final, haunting thought. Can a case ever really be closed when the sea refuses to give up its dead?